And so at that age, I blamed everything on my parents. That was easy to blame. And so blaming them became a lot easier to make foolish decisions. And so I did, obviously, you know, 20 years later, you realize, hey, you know what, it was they were all my decisions. So
you said 20 years later, you're taking responsibility for those decisions.
Yeah, I mean, I took responsibilities even by the age of 19. You know, I had many associates, knew many people, and at one point in time, I met an individual who was also gang involved, and he was one of my associates. And one day he came in looking different, talking different, and invited me to some youth gathering. I've always been, my grandmother in Mexico always taught me to believe in God. I come from a very family who's a very strong Catholic faith.
Right.
And you know, she taught me about the Bible and taught me about God and Jesus. And so I had that background knowledge. So when he came and approached me, he thought that I was going to mock him or push him away, and I just expressed my respect for him.
How old were you at that time?
I was about 18 going to 19, yeah.
Okay.
And so being that I was part of a gang that actually had God in our manifesto and our constitutions and our beliefs, we pray to God in our gang meetings. It wasn't like I wasn't an anti-Christ or anti-God.
Which God were you praying to, though?
At the time, you know, we believed it was Jesus, Yahweh, as we pronounced God's name, but it was definitely a false faith, and because obviously we didn't practice anything we believed in. It was written, but it was never practiced or truly believed or accepted.
It's interesting that it would be part of your
yes
street organization constitution.
Correct.
Right?
Exactly. And so, you know, everything was false. Sense of brotherhood eventually evolved. And so when this individual came, it was completely different. I knew who he was, and I know how he felt and how he felt about himself. And this new identity of being called a Christian, I was very respectful. I eventually I put my pride on the side, because I felt that, you know, if you weren't Catholic, then you weren't,
right,
you know, worthy of, you know, Christian faith. And at that point in time, I knew I was soul seeking during that time. I knew that. Just to give you an example, there were some times when we would commit certain acts, certain things, and I would come home, and for the most part, I would just come home and go to sleep. But there was a few times when I came home and I just felt in my soul that I needed to get out of my bed and not take it as lightly, and get on my knees and ask God for forgiveness. I don't know why. I didn't know why. I didn't have the faith at the time. I believed in God, but I didn't believe He can help me or help my situation.
So I guess I want to understand, and now that, you know, you talk about these acts, right, that you did, and I guess I want to understand, like, what is going on inside. And you were a young person at that time. Like, what's really going on inside? How are you able to kind of shut down your conscience? How is it that you're able to kind of do these things and come home and go to sleep, right?
You become numb now more so than ever with our generation. All we had is MTV, so we didn't have YouTube, we didn't have, you know, Facebook and all these social medias, and obviously TV commercials were completely different. So were the movies and shows. Now, you had your gang movies, but it was just different. So eventually, some individuals are just, it becomes easy for them, depending on their mental stability. Other individuals, is survival. For mine was survival. You know, I was a gang member from a community that had gangs come in and out that neighborhood for quite some time.
Right.
In that neighborhood, my brothers and sisters were part of that gang.
Right.
It eventually changed, and it became changing. Within a year or two after I actually became an official member of a gang, my family decided to move into a different neighborhood.
Okay.
You know, I'm a 13-year-old kid. Mom and dad have to pay the rent. Who am I to say where we're gonna live?
Right, right.
But eventually, they moved into a territory that was opposition. So I was living in a neighborhood where a gang that was my enemy, they were controlling that neighborhood. And so for me, it was survival. It was being able to live another day, and it was also it eventually became I became numb to what took place. In the beginning, I was looking for more of the brotherhood. I was looking for more of that family type. And when I realized that it wasn't as much, it became, well, you know, I've made this decision. You know, I made my bed, I have to lay it in.
So that's really interesting on the phone. I kind of want to just stay there just for a second, that your initial reason for participating was that you were looking for camaraderie. You were looking for this brotherhood, to be part of a family, to feel connected. But then you discovered that there were a lot of other things that were going on that were sort of anti all of those things, anti-brotherhood. And it makes me think of the scripture that says there's a way that seems right to a man, but the end is death. And I think it's so important, if we have young people that are even watching right now who may be in gangs or who may be thinking about being in a gang, that it may seem right because we're looking for all of those things, right? Like you talked, Liz, about wanting to be loved. And I mean, it's kind of the same thing, this love and acceptance and feeling connected to something bigger than ourselves. But the end of it is destruction.
And it definitely is. It's just, you know, again, it's whatever you're lacking at home. I came to a conclusion that we all of us there came together because we bonded because of common experiences.
Yeah.
Everyone in our circle had a flaw in their home, and everyone has a flaw in their home one way or another. But we had some serious issues. If it wasn't domestic violence, it was sexual abuse. If it wasn't absentee parents, you know, it was financial and all kinds of different drugs or prison. Correct.
Yeah,
so you were lacking something at home. You know, a kid doesn't get up in the morning and say, today I'm going to join a gang because it's the right thing to do, or because it's just what I was born to. You just become part of it. And that's what happened. And to answer your question on the conscious piece, you develop some numbness. Some individuals completely are numb, while other individuals, they just take it as, you know, it's part of the life. And so going back to that, that's what happened. I just knew that during that time, I felt that my spirit, my soul was being prepared to be talked to. And when this individual invited me to this youth group, I realized that I wasn't alone. It's just that pride that you don't talk with your friends, you don't talk with your associates, you don't talk with your members about what really is going on, because it's weakness. What you do is you express it in the manner that is acceptable to the streets. And that's, you just continue on that path.
So the street has its own language, if you will, right?
And you know, and even I see it among, now that I work with young people, I see it, you know, not just in gangs, you see it in posses, you see it in groups, you see it in cliques. You don't have to be gang involved to actually go through the same motion, to go through the same issues, to deal with it. It's, you know, it happens among groups and young people. We're all in one way or another looking for the same thing and search for the same thing. We're just taking different avenues. For mine, it just happened to be, you know, the streets and involving
Well,
gangs.
and if there isn't someone at home to help to build up that inner core, to nurture your spirit, to help you to resist pressures, to help you to understand that you are loved, that you are accepted, that you are valued. And God created us to want to be valued, right? That you are going to look for that inevitably somewhere else. I mean, and some people could do it in what might be a positive way, like maybe become a workaholic or an overachiever. And so there's different ways sometimes that we channel that, you know, that emptiness, that void.
And it's true. And it's not just having that individual tell you, going back to what Liz said, it's just not the saying and the expressing verbally, but it's the showing. I remember my older stepbrother calling me from prison. He would call home every now and then. When are we going to go visit him? You know, just the basic dialogue. And I remember I was 11 years old, and he would say, hey, you're 11 years old now, and these guys on the street, they're going to snatch you. I'm just going to let you know right now, this is no game. I'm in prison. So whatever you do, don't join a gang. You know, go to school, go do something. But he wasn't out here with me going through the motions and everything else that we were going through. And so with that said, it was like, it was easier said than done because you're in there. I'm out here. I'm the one that has to survive. You know, and so those were good words, but there was no one walking with me. And as a father, I look at my kids today, and there's one thing that I definitely am aware of, is that these kids, these children of mine, they don't just need someone or the knowledge of knowing they have a dad. They need to see me, and they need to see me in the role of being a dad.
That's absolutely
and
right.
That's the difference. That's a struggle, obviously, right now with my schooling and all that. But going back to say that was what was missing in my life. I had a great mother, a beautiful mother. I mean, she was praying for me for since I was young, and always wanting to make sure that I was on the right path. But she had to work she had to work and bring home the bacon because Daddy wasn't there. She had to be where she had to be in order to give us a roof and some clothes and be able to put us to school. And to make a long story short, pretty much, she was an absentee parent. No matter how much she loved me, the need called her elsewhere. And so one thing evolved. I accepted.
So you got invited to church.
Correct.
And you went.
That's right. I went several times. The funny thing about it is that I did try to live with my dad. We met up and we started talking. He lived in Mexico. I got in some trouble as a young teen. So
you did meet up with your real dad.
Well, my real dad. And then he said, I just went through a divorce. And since you're here in Mexico, why don't you just stay here? If you're going to go back, you might end up in prison or dead, and just stay here and we'll try to work it out. And it didn't work out. We're two different people. His wife came back. So I came back to Chicago. And since I had dropped out, I went back to school. I got accepted during summer school. Something else happened, and the police came and arrested me in school. I was taking my final. I remember my English teacher, she was a believer that summer, and she was really happy with doing poetry, and she was really happy with, I took it as she was really happy with me being there as one of her students. And we were doing our final, and just the police came in, CPD came in, put the cuffs on me, and just took me out and charged me for some stuff as a youth. And I remember the principal looking at me and said, I'm going to remember your face, and I'm going to make sure that you don't come back ever into the school or any CPS school.
What?
And I was a kid. I was a teenager. I was still young and ignorant, and I didn't care. So I just went on, and then my mother says, hey son, look, if there's anything you can give me in life, it's at least a high school diploma. Please. And I said, fine, I'll go back to school, I'll go register. And I wouldn't go back to register, but the only way I was able to register was I had to talk to the same principal. So I remember saying, man, I'm not gonna be in it. When I went on to tell my mom, I'm gonna let her down again. And I just said, whatever, I'm just gonna, if it doesn't hurt. So I went in and I said, hey, I re-registered, I went to Mexico, came back, and now they need me to, they need your signature. He didn't even look at me, he was busy, he just said, give it to me. Signed it off and gave it to me, and I walked in. Immediately 2 weeks later is when I met this guy who started telling me about he's a Christian and so on. So it was kind of like ordained, it was like divine intervention there. And that's how I started going to the youth groups, and that's how I eventually said, being a Christian is what I want to be. And I went back to the street organization, and that was a whole different chapter of threats, and getting out of the street organization where I was from was not something you just played with or made a decision and say, okay guys, I'm just not going to be part of the fantasy football this year, It's
right.
It doesn't work that way.
Because it's like get beat in and get beat out kind of thing, right?
And so, we would get threats, and people would tell me, if you show up, you're going to come out either on a stretcher or in a body bag, so don't come. And God worked that out. I led another guy, and I started preaching to some kid and one of my partners, and he became a Christian, and then we had a trial. So they set a trial for us, and we had like a
the
democracy.
Street organization,
yeah. So we had a meeting.
Wow.
And we're like, okay, today on the table is these two individuals, and they say they want to be Christians, and they want to go upon their life and do great things in the community, and we just got to find out what we're going to do with them. And I had prayed, I said, God, if it's my time to die, I'm not going to run. Because how can I gain respect from individuals that I want to help? If I run, they would never respect me.
Wow.
But if I confront them, I might win them. And you said to be all things to all people, so you may win them all.
Right.
And so in this case, I want to go to.
How old were you at that time?
I was 19.
Okay.
And so when I went to my trial with these individuals, one of the youth, the leader of our section, of our area, looked. I know God had touched his heart, and and later on he got touched by YFC. He put it on trial and said, we do have a democratic way of doing things. So whoever feels that we should deal with them violently, we're going to have to deal with that way. But I think since they're going to do something that's already in our manifesto, something we already, quote unquote, believe.
Pray to God already.
So I think we should give them an opportunity. That's my opinion. So if you think like me, raise your hand. If you don't, don't leave it. And whatever comes out of it, the majority votes, it wins. Miraculously, every single one of them. Even the ones that were sending the threats, even the ones that didn't want to, even the ones that were really hating on the fact that we were walking out and didn't want to let us go, they raised their hands and said, whatever. But if we catch them doing something else, they're dead. And that's what happened. And then from that point on, I went back. I helped 7 or 8 of them get out of the organization. Some of them got severely beaten, but it was worth it for them. And then it evolved into just working with several organizations in the city of Chicago during that time, social street organizations, and working with not-for-profits and community-based organizations and churches. And then I began doing outreach and all kinds of different methods of trying to rescue these individuals from the falseness of thinking that being part of a gang is being part of something important and it's going to lead or that's your only way. There's no way out. I lost hope and whatnot. And I did that for several years. You go back
to that principal one day too, and let that.
I didn't go, but I did go to back to. I did go back to the school, to my grammar school, my high school, and I came out on Guidepost, a magazine front cover, and I wanted to give that to them because I felt that they were believers. Turned out they were believers, and I had it since they were. Once I became a believer.
But that principal that signed.
Oh no, I don't know whatever happened to them.
Yeah, because I mean it might be interesting because actually he did sign the dotted line, and you could say, look, you signed the dotted line, and I want you to know.
Unaware.
That this is what's come from that, because the next time he'll sign the dotted line again. Because there might be another guy that or girl that's in that situation.
He was pretty old at the time, so I'm not sure if he's still there.
Still around anymore.
But
talk about both of your roles right now with the ministry. I know that you just said you're going to be graduating from Moody, heading to Nicaragua, and you're going to be ministering to youth out there. And your role right now, are you involved with them now?
Yeah, I'm definitely in a leadership position in the sense that I am operating and the same thing I've been doing for years with Youth for Christ, and being one of probably the only one in the chapter of Chicago or in this northwest suburbs, Chicago and northwest Indiana and Kankakee area, the only individual that has gang intervention, gang prevention background. I do collaborate with La Vita Community Church, New Life. I collaborated also with New Hope, Nueva Esperanza, different churches to try to use their facilities and be able to offer anything from GED, tutoring, to assist a collaborative organization like the YMCA Revenge Program, and also La Vita Community Church, and collaborate to where we can run a basketball night and be able to share biblical principles that might impact their life. I always let them know, I'm a man, I'm human. I'm definitely not perfect. One of the things I want to make sure that these young people understand is that no one's perfect. We all fall short of the glory, and that they look at me as just an individual that's here to extend a hand. And that's pretty much what we do in the city of Chicago, in the Little Village community, part of the Home Park community, and we want to expand eventually. So my time with them is obviously very limited compared to what I used to do when I was on as a staff, full-time staff with them during the SPAD
you're
program.
In school and you have children now.
And so, so I carried on what I've always done since I came to the faith. And I just continue doing now through Youth for Christ.
Liz, do you have a good story? You talked about your passion for working with youth, and can you think of any good story that you can share with us relative to youth that you've served?
I think one of the biggest things was the summer when I was in Nicaragua. There was a boy there, and his name was Freddie, and his name is Freddie. He's alive and well. That sounds bad when you say was. He is 15, and he just got saved about 6 months before I got there, so probably December, January. So he's been a Christian for almost a year now. But he was kind of a sad boy, a little bit shut off still, and it was very strange to see him. And I would ask him, and we were driving home from the hotel in Managua, which is the capital city, and we just dropped off one of the teams that was down from the States serving with us. And I looked at him in the eyes and I said, "Freddie, who are you?" And he goes, "What do you mean?" I said, "I want to know your story." And he goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, who are you? And he said, I'm just Freddie. And I looked at him and I was like, okay. I was like, but you have a story to you, and I know that you do. And he sat there and he kind of welled up with tears, and he's a little bit of a prideful 15-year-old boy, and so he didn't want to just sit there and cry, but so he kind of shut down, and I looked at him. I said, did that question bother you? And I asked who you were. And he said, a little bit. And I was like, okay. I was like, you don't have to answer, but I want you to know that I want to know you. And this was after I'd like been interacting with him in small doses for 2 months or so.